The gavel cracked like a gunshot in the stale air of the Seattle courthouse, and I felt the world tilt under my feet. "Case dismissed," the judge intoned, her voice flat as the rain slicked streets outside, but it hit me like a betrayal sharper than any knife. My father's eyes, those cold, unyielding blues I'd inherited but never wanted, met mine across the aisle, not with triumph, but with something worse: pity. In that split second, as the courtroom buzzed back to life around us, I realized I'd just sued the man who raised me and lost everything that mattered. It started 6 months earlier, in the dim glow of my father's study in our old family home on Queen and Hill. The kind of place that screamed old money. Mahogany bookshelves stuffed with first editions, a Persian rug that swallowed footsteps, and that massive oak desk where he'd signed away my childhood dreams one deal at a time. Joseph Harlan was a titan in Seattle's tech scene, the guy who'd bootstrapped a software empire from a garage in the 90s, back when dial-up was king. To the world, he was unbreakable. Broad-shouldered, silver hair slicked back, always in tailored suits that cost more than my rent. To me, Elias Harlan, his only son, he was a ghost, present but untouchable, especially after Mom died when I was 12. I'd come home that rainy Tuesday because the letter from his lawyer had finally arrived, crisp and impersonal, tucked into the mailbox like junk mail. Estate planning updates. But it wasn't an update. It was a gut punch. Dad was rewriting his will, cutting me out almost entirely. The bulk of the fortune, millions in stocks, the family cabin in the Cascades, even the house I grew up in, would go to charities he'd never mentioned, and a trust for discretionary family needs. Nothing for me. No explanation, just a postscript. This reflects evolving priorities. Evolving priorities. Code for the fact that I'd come out to him 5 years ago, over Thanksgiving turkey that tasted like ash. I'd met Finn that summer, at an indie film festival in Capitol Hill. A lanky barista with freckles like constellations and a laugh that cut through the fog of my post-grad malaise. He was studying graphic design at the community college, slinging lattes by day and sketching murals by night. Our first date was at Pike Place Market, sharing clam chowder under the shadow of the public market sign, his hand brushing mine as gulls wheeled overhead. It was easy, electric, the way he'd quote Vonnegut mid-sentence, or how he'd pull me into spontaneous dances in his cramped apartment when the Smiths came on the vinyl. Finn made me believe in something real, something louder than the silence Dad wrapped around us like a shroud. But when I told Joseph, over that disastrous holiday, his response was a fork pausing midair. "Elias," he'd said, voice like gravel. "This family's built on legacy, not distractions." No yelling, no disownment. Just that word, distractions, hanging there like smoke. After that, our calls dwindled to quarterly check-ins about my career in nonprofit graphic design, which he dismissed as hobby work. Finn became the unspoken wedge, the reason I hadn't been invited to the cabin in years. So when that letter landed, fury boiled over. How dare he erase me? I'd spent my life chasing his approval. Top of my class at UW, interning at his rival startups just to prove I could hack it, only to be sidelined for priorities. I hired a lawyer on a shoestring, a sharp-eyed woman named Rivera who'd fought for queer rights pro bono. "We'll argue undue influence or lack of notice," she said, pacing her cluttered office overlooking Elliott Bay. "But Elias, this is family. Courts hate airing dirty laundry." I didn't care. I filed the suit that week, Harlan versus Harlan. Splashed across the legal notices like a tabloid headline. The betrayal stung deepest because it felt personal, a final rejection, not just of me, but of the life I'd built with Finn. We talked about it late into the night, tangled in his sheets that smelled of coffee grounds and acrylic paint. "You're worth more than his money," he'd murmur, tracing circles on my chest. But I saw the worry in his eyes, the way he'd glance at our shared lease agreement on the fridge. We were scraping by in a one-bedroom in Fremont, dreaming of a studio where he could paint full-time and I could launch my own design firm. Dad's inheritance was supposed to be our launchpad, the safety net he'd promised in whispers after Mom's funeral. "I'll take care of you, kid." The weeks blurred into a storm of depositions and affidavits. Dad's team, slick sharks from a downtown firm, painted me as the ungrateful prodigal, dredging up emails where I'd vented about his emotional constipation. I countered with texts from my teens, begging for his time at soccer games he skipped for board meetings. Finn was my anchor through it all, showing up with takeout from Ivers after every hearing. His presence a quiet rebellion against the chaos. "Remember that time we got caught in the deluge at Gasworks Park?" he'd say, pulling me onto the couch. "We laughed till we cried. That's us, unbreakable." But cracks formed. My freelance gigs dried up as clients whispered about the family feud. Finn's shifts at the cafe doubled, leaving him exhausted, paintbrushes forgotten. One night, after a brutal cross-examination where Dad's lawyer grilled me on my lifestyle choices, I snapped at Finn over nothing. A spilled mug of tea that shattered on the tile. "This is your fault too," I hurled, the words venomous and untrue. He froze, green eyes wide, then whispered, "I'm fighting for you, Elias. But if loyalty's just a word to you now." He trailed off, grabbing his jacket and vanishing into the drizzle-slicked streets. He came back at dawn, soaked and shivering, but the seed of doubt had sprouted. Was I dragging him into my war? The climax hit on the eve of trial, in the shadow of the Space Needle's glowing arms. I'd snuck into the family home, key still under the mat, a relic of trust, and found Dad in the study, hunched over that damn desk, a tumbler of scotch sweating rings on the blotter. The room smelled of leather and regret, the same as always. "Dad," I said, voice cracking the silence. He looked up, startled, lines etched deeper around his mouth. For a moment we were just father and son again, no suits, no summons. "Elias, you shouldn't be here." But he didn't call security. Instead, he gestured to the chair opposite, the one I'd perched in as a kid, spinning tales of astronauts and superheroes. We talked, or tried to. I laid it bare. The hurt of his silence after I came out, the way he'd treated Finn like a phase instead of family. "You promised you'd take care of me. Was that a lie?" He stared into his glass, knuckles white. "I thought I was protecting you," he finally said, voice raw. "This world is not kind to men like you, like us." The words hung, then shattered the air. "Us." He leaned forward, eyes glistening, not with pity, but pain. "Your grandfather disowned me once, you know, for the same distraction. I swore I'd never let that poison touch you, so I built walls, high ones, and the will. It was my way of forcing you to stand on your own. No crutches, no Harlan shadow." Betrayal twisted anew, but this time it was layered, complex. He'd been scared, not of me, but for me. Echoes of his own hidden wounds, buried under boardroom bravado. I pressed him on Finn, on why he'd never met the man who made me whole. "Because seeing you happy with him, it meant admitting I'd failed you as a father." His admission cracked something in me, tears hot on my cheeks. We sat there as thunder rumbled over the sound. The first real conversation in years, raw and unfiltered. The trial dawned gray and unrelenting, the courthouse a fortress of marble and muted echoes. Reporters lurked outside, umbrellas blooming like black flowers, hungry for the Harlan implosion. Finn was there in the gallery, his hand finding mine before we parted. His touch a lifeline, freckled fingers interlacing with my trembling ones. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we're the legacy that matters." Inside, the air hummed with anticipation. Dad entered last, impeccable as ever, but his eyes sought mine across the crowded room. Rivera laid out our case. Emotional coercion, implied promises breached. The judge listened, impassive, as Dad's lawyer dismantled it, citing the will's clarity, my opportunistic timing. Then it was his turn to testify. Joseph Harlan took the stand like a man walking the plank, his voice steady but laced with something new, vulnerability. He spoke of Mom's laugh echoing in these halls, of teaching me to bait a hook at the cabin, of the terror that gripped him when I came out. Not revulsion, but fear of a world that chews up dreamers. "Elias sued me because I pushed him away," he said, gaze locking on mine. "But family isn't ledgers and trusts. It's showing up, even when it hurts. I failed him there. The inheritance is his by right. But more than that, I owe him my truth." The courtroom held its breath. Whispers rippled, reporters scribbling furiously, as he detailed his own secret. A college love lost to 70s homophobia, a life half-lived in closets of his own making. "I cut him out to toughen him," Dad confessed. "But all I did was teach him doubt. If loyalty means anything, it's this. I'm proud of the man he's become. With Finn. Without my shadow. The gavel fell not in dismissal, but continuance. For mediation, the judge ruled, her tone brooking no argument. But in that moment, as Dad stepped down and crossed the aisle, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of scotch and rain-damp wool, the real verdict landed. I'm sorry, son, he murmured into my shoulder, voice breaking. For all of it. We settled out of court 2 weeks later, over coffee at a diner in Pioneer Square, the kind with vinyl booths cracked from decades of secrets. The inheritance stayed mine, augmented by a trust for Finn and me to start that studio. But the true windfall was the thaw. Dad meeting Finn over pie, their laughter tentative at first, then genuine, as stories flowed like the Duwamish at flood. You got my stubborn streak? Dad told him, clapping Finn's shoulder. Good. He'll need it. Months on, as autumn painted the Cascades gold, we 3 hiked the cabin trails, blisters and all, trading barbs and memories under skies vast as forgiveness. I'd sued my father, weaponizing blood against blood, chasing ghosts of approval. But in the end, loyalty wasn't won in courtrooms or coffers. It was forged in the quiet admissions, the hands extended across chasms. Finn's fingers laced in mine as we crested the ridge, Dad trailing with a grin I'd thought lost forever. In America, the land of reinvention of second acts, we'd rewritten our script. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. And that, I learned, was inheritance enough.